Good evening, everyone, and welcome. It's the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully more people will continue to join as we go through some of the housekeeping. Welcome to Solar Oregon's How to Go Solar and Storage workshop. On the agenda for today's presentation, we're going to be going over how solar works, how you can know if your home is the right fit for solar. Then we will dive into the exciting topic of energy storage and how solar and storage are complementary technologies. We will then go through some of the available incentives to help make solar a little bit cheaper. And then I'll talk through how you can get started on your solar journey today. First off, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the organization putting on this presentation, Solar Oregon, that I work for. And while I do that, I'm also going to start launching some polls just so that I can have some information about who is in the Zoom room with us today. If these polls are completely optional, but please fill them out if you feel comfortable doing so. So Solar Oregon is a 501(c)(3) nonprofit that focuses on education, outreach, community, and advocacy throughout Oregon. We do this through educational webinars such as this one, comparing solar quotes and special topic events, as well as in-person events that dive deeper into some of those topics, provides a chance to connect with other solar enthusiasts and provide solar enthusiasts an opportunity to connect with each other. Thank you everyone for filling out that poll. Um, we we are a member-based organization and you can become a member today. Thank you to all our members who help support Solar Oregon. Their support is what makes work like this possible. I'm going to go ahead and launch another poll. We do have some great upcoming events. You can always find all our upcoming events on our social media at Solar Oregon and our Eventbrite. You can also find at Solar Oregon, but one event that I did want to highlight is our Solar Wine Tour, which is going to be on May 10th, Mother's Day weekend. This is a really fun event where you get to enjoy wines from throughout the Willamette Valley. You get free transportation and a really delicious catered lunch. This year, we will also be having lunch at the Let Us Shine project, which is an agrivoltaic community farm that recently installed solar panels. So it's very exciting, and I hope to see at least some of you there. This presentation is also made possible by support from the Energy Trust of Oregon. Energy Trust of Oregon is an independent nonprofit that provides access to affordable energy. They serve the 1.6 million customers of Portland General Electric, Pacific Power, Northwest Natural Gas, Cascade Natural Gas, and Avista. Thank you so much, Energy Trust of Oregon, for your continued support. And you can always find more information about them at energytrustoforegon.org. And thank you everyone for filling out that poll. I have one last poll I'm going to send out. And while I do that, I'm also going to put in the chat some resources that I'll be referencing throughout the presentation. Feel free to save any of those, and I'll also put them in the chat again at the end of the presentation. Okay, thank you everyone for doing those polls. The last piece of housekeeping is to please add any questions you have throughout the presentation to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen that looks like the one this orange arrow here is pointing to. I'll be going through all the questions in that Q&A at the end of the presentation, but don't feel like you have to wait until the end of the presentation to put your questions in there. You can put them in as soon as you think of it. And please ask me questions. I want this presentation to be beneficial to all of you that are here. And the best way to do that is to make sure you are getting your questions answered. So now let's dive into how solar works. So here's a simple graphic that illustrates a solar system. On the left, we have the photovoltaic or PV panel. This would be the panel that is mounted on the ground or on your roof that the sunlight hits and generates a volt of electricity. From there, that electricity flows into another device called an inverter or microinverter, which converts the electricity generated from the panel from DC electricity to usable AC electricity for your home. The AC electricity then flows into your home electric panel, where it can then go out to all your lights, charge your computer, charge an electric vehicle, basically anything you need electricity for. If at any given point in time your solar panels are generating more power than you are using, then they would flow out to your new utility meter. If you have solar, you'd get a fancy bi-directional meter that allows electricity to flow in both directions. So if you're ever generating excess electricity, it flows out to your utility meter and then out to the grid to be utilized by your friends and neighbors. And if at any point in time, such as at night or if it's storming out, your solar panels are not generating enough electricity to cover the usage in your home, then you can also pull electricity from the grid in order to power your home, just like you would be doing if you did not have solar. So now I'm going to dive into some of the components of that system a little bit more, starting with that device I mentioned called an inverter. So here pictured, we have an example of two different inverters. On the left, a regular string inverter, and on the right, a microinverter. String inverters on the left work by taking all the electricity from all the solar panels and converting it all at once. So for a 10-panel solar system, you'd have one string inverter. In contrast, microinverters, which are these black boxes in the image on the right, take only the electricity from 1 to 2 panels at a time and convert just that electricity, then flow out to your utility meter. That means if you have a 10-panel solar system, you could have up to 10 microinverters. Both string inverters and microinverters are installed frequently throughout Oregon. And it really just depends on the needs of your system, your budget, and what your solar contractor best recommends for your home. Now, where do your solar panels actually go? There are two main options: roof-mounted solar, which is when the solar panels are mounted on your roof. This is a great option, especially in high-density urban areas, because it takes no extra space in order to utilize your roof. And often it is a large flat plane that is just sitting there, and solar does not decrease the usability of your roof. Your roof will still work very well to protect your home from the elements, even with solar panels on it. And the second option would be ground-mounted solar. This is when your solar is mounted in the ground. This is a great option if you do have some extra space that you'd like to devote to some solar panels. However, it can also be more expensive and just come with some added costs, because you will need to build supports for those panels and also run conduit lines from wherever you mount them on the ground out to back to your home and utility meter. One other option are solar roof tiles. This is a solar product that is also your roof, so it both can generate electricity and also is a roofing product that will protect your home from the elements. There are several brands available. However, this is a much newer tech and therefore much more expensive. Price declines are unpredictable, and we don't recommend waiting if this is a product you're interested in, as this can be a little bit more complicated to install. If you are interested in getting solar roof tiles, I highly recommend making sure you work with a contractor who has installed them before and asking for references so that you can talk and see how their current customers who have them enjoy them. Now, if you have a solar system here in Oregon, most likely you'll be utilizing the net metering system, which is how you're able to pull power from the grid and also export power from the grid, and also earn money back on your bill for that power you are exporting. And that system's net metering. So to start, I'm going to walk through two examples of how net metering works, first in a sunny summer month and then in a cloudier winter month. And then I'll also show you what it looks like on your bill. So first up, in the sunny summer months, it is nice and sunny. There is no prediction of snow on the horizon. We have blue skies and long days, and your solar production is way up. It's at its absolute max. You are producing so much power. However, you're also out riding bikes, exploring, getting a yummy iced coffee at your local cafe. So you're also just consuming your regular amount and maybe even less than that. That means you're generating more electricity from your solar panels than your home is using on any given day. And so all that excess electricity you are generating would flow out to your grid and you'd earn net metering credits for it. So then let's fast forward to a day like today. It is kind of cloudy out if I look out my window. I know there's predictions of snow in the weather. I'm crossing my fingers that we actually, sorry about that we actually get some. And your solar panels are still producing some amount of electricity. That orange bar isn't all the way zero, but it produces a lot less. It's just darker, it's cloudier. It makes sense that your solar panels wouldn't be making quite as much electricity. But your consumption has stayed about the same. It hasn't really changed that much. That means you're having to draw more power from the grid in order to make up that difference. And in order to offset that power, hopefully you have some net metering credits from the sunny summer months to use. So what does that look like in practice? So here we can see in the bill on the left, the calculated net meter reading at the beginning of the month and the one at the end of the month. And for this example, we can see that this customer generated an excess of 327 kilowatt hours to in net metering credits, and therefore their billable kilowatt hours for that month are 0. And their year-to-date baked excess generation is 3,072 kilowatt hours. So that negative 327 gets added to this year-to-date baked excess generation. That is the number of credits they have worked up in order to help offset their bill when it is less sunny. Net metering credits roll over from month to month. That's what allows you to build up credits all summer and use them all winter. However, they do not roll over from year to year. The net metering year begins and ends on March 31st. So any excess credits you have on midnight on March 31st, you forfeit. Unfortunately, the utility companies will not cut you a check for that excess credits you have, and instead it goes into a donation to help low-income subscribers. But this is their year-to-date banked excess generation, and they will be able to utilize that throughout the winter. And like I said, this customer's billable kilowatt hours are 0. And if we look over here on the right, though, despite their billable kilowatt hours for this month being 0, the actual price of their bill is not 0. They still owe about $12.63. This is because there are some base charges that come from just being connected to the grid in the first place. These are some taxes and fees and totals between $10 and $15 between where you are in Oregon. Now, this is a kind of complicated system to understand, so if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll be sure to get to them at the end of the presentation. But for now, I'm going to continue on. So with this system, your system size is very important because you want to make sure your system is sized to meet but not exceed your expected electricity usage. Because your utility company isn't going to cut you a check for any excess electricity you forfeit at the end of the net metering year, you don't want to be paying for a bunch of extra solar panels that you do not need. That is why, as I said, your solar contractor will do their best to meet and not exceed the amount of electricity you need. They will talk to you about, they will ask to see some of your previous bills and also about any lifestyle changes, such as upgrading to more efficient appliances, people moving in or out of your home, and things like that in order to try and predict how your electricity usage might change throughout the course of the lifespan of your system. Other factors that might be considered will be your available space, budget, and aesthetics. A solar system is measured in kW, or kilowatts, and the average system size here in Oregon is about 8 kilowatts. So now, how can you know if your home is right for solar? So no matter where you are in the state, you can have good solar access. This image here depicts the sun at both the highest point in the sky at the summer solstice and the lowest point in the sky at the winter solstice. And as you can see, it is always in the southern hemisphere. That means here in Oregon, we mostly install solar on south-facing roof planes, though they can be installed on west and east as well. The only roof plane directions that we really do not install solar on are north, northeast, and northwest, and that's just because they do not get the proper amount of solar resource. Now, one thing though, even though the state as a whole does get enough sun to make solar a viable option for many people, your home may be too shaded to make solar a good option for you. Shade impacts the ability for the sun to reach your roof and can prevent you from going solar due to just not having quite as much sun. However, don't cut down all your beautiful trees. They do a great job helping keep the city cool, helping keep your home cool. Instead, I'd highly recommend looking into community solar as another option. And there's a link about that in the chat as well. Now, another thing that can prohibit your solar journey is your roof complexity. On the left, there's a more complex roof, and while it has lots of south-facing roof planes, they are all relatively small and would be unable to have one continuous span of solar. This means that there's just added complexity and cost associated with the project, and it may end up having to be a smaller system overall just because of space limitations. In contrast, the roof pictured on the right has one large continuous roof plane, which just makes for a simpler system overall and can help save on cost. Then there's also your roof condition age. If you're mounting your solar on the roof, we recommend that you have at least 20 years of roof life left. And this is just because solar must be taken off when re-roofing your home, which can lead to just some added costs for you and can often lead to your solar panels breaking or getting damaged in the process. If you have an old roof, we recommend you wait until after you re-roof your home in order to go solar. Now, not only what's on top of your roof matters, but also what's under it. In order to support the weight of solar panels, you have to make sure your roof is strong enough. If you have trusses, like pictured on the left, your roof will be strong enough to support solar and even the strictest of definitions. However, if you just have grafters like pictured on the right, which is very common in the older homes throughout Portland, you might need to get some extra engineering or drawing done in order to see if your roof could actually support the solar panels, and in some cases even add in some extra trusses and roof supports in order to ensure that your solar is not going to fall through your roof. So now that we've, apologies, my nose is just a little bit itchy. Now that we've covered all those details about solar, we're going to talk about solar and storage. So solar makes storage more effective. They are complementary technologies. Your solar panels allow you to gain power from the sun, and your storage allows you to use that power when the grid is down. So here's just an example of what that looks like. We can have a battery in the garage and solar panels on the roof. One common misconception about solar is that if you just have solar, you'd be able to use power when the grid is down. However, that is not true. When the grid goes down, they have to ensure that no power is flowing through the lines in order to protect any workers working on it. And so they have to ensure that your solar panels are not trying to export power to the grid, which means your home would also lose power unless you have a battery. So now why might you be interested in having energy resilience, which is the ability to use power when the grid is down? There can be frequent short outages caused by storms and squirrels. This is when a squirrel chews through a line or when a line goes down due to ice and snow. There also are semi-frequent public safety power shutoffs, which is when the utility cuts off power for a certain area in order to reduce the fire risk. The first of these happened in Oregon in 2020. And here in Oregon, we also have the unique risk of the Cascadia seismic hazard, which is the predicted large earthquake coming for this region that estimates could cut off power to the Willamette Valley for up to 3 weeks and much longer out on the coast. So when it comes to picking a battery, there are many brands and chemistries available. However, some installers may specialize in one specific battery type. Once you have one battery, you are unable to mix and match different battery brands. So if you have a Tesla Powerwall, for example, you would be unable to get an E2 battery. You'd have to stick with whatever you installed first or uninstall one in order to reinstall the other. However, you can mix and match your solar panel and battery brand, so you can have a E2 battery and Tesla solar panels if that is what you would like. So when it comes to getting a battery for your home, it's a question of what you want to power and for how long. So what It can be prohibitively expensive to back up your entire home for a substantial length of time, and therefore many people instead elect to do a partial backup, where you select only a few important circuits to retain power. In order to do this, your solar contractor and electrician will create a separate second essential loads panel. This is a secondary electrical panel that is connected to the battery, and in the event of an outage, only the circuits on this panel would retain power. This does add complexity and cost to a system. So as I said, it's a question of what needs power and for how long. Frequently, people choose to select a few lights in common areas, a outlet or two in order to charge devices, and a fridge in the kitchen in order to keep all your food nice and cold. However, the more things you have on your essential loads panel, the shorter length of time your battery will last. So it's up to you to decide what you want to power and how you would like to do it. There is always the chance that it will be sunny enough that your solar panels will be able to recharge your battery, which you can do even when the grid is down. But that is, of course, requires there to be sun. And in the event of an outage like a snowstorm, we can't always guarantee that it will be sunny the next day. So when to install storage? There is both AC coupled and DC coupled storage, which basically means which side of the inverter it is on. And if you install solar and storage at the same time, you can save money just because you do not have to have the contractor and electricians out again and pull additional permits. There are also some incentives that you can only access the full potential of if you're installing solar and storage at the same time. That being said, you can add storage to an existing solar system. It's just good to be aware that there is extra cost. And if you are planning to add a storage system later, it's good to inform your contractor of that so that they can make sure there is space for it within your system and optimize your system for that. Now, this next thing about batteries is that they require space. Ideally, they can be placed near an electric panel. However, they cannot be in an enclosed space, such as a crawl space or cupboard. They can be installed outdoors. However, there can be some aesthetic considerations with that, and they must meet the National Electric Code. So now that we've gone through all this, I'm going to talk about some of the available incentives to help offset the cost of this great technology. First up, and the largest incentive there is the Solar Investment Tax Credit, or ITC. This is 30% of the total cost of your system as a dollar-for-dollar tax credit. Now, really quick, before I give more details about this, I am not a tax professional. This is not official tax advice. If I was, I'd probably get much more money back on my taxes this year. However, it doesn't look like that's going to be happening. And so if you have any detailed questions or want questions about your specific scenario, please consult a tax professional. So as I said, this is a 30% dollar for dollar incentive of the total cost of your solar system. So whatever your total cost of that system is, you can claim on your taxes using Form 5695, and it can be applied to both solar and storage. If you do not have enough tax liability in order to claim the entire cost, it can be claimed over several years. Next up, here in Oregon, we also have the Energy Trust of Oregon solar incentives. These are specific incentives available to people who are served by PGE or Pacific Power. And it is $950 for PGE customers installing solar, $1,100 for Pacific Power, and then an additional $475 per kilowatt hour, up to $5,700 maximum for installed home energy storage. In order to access this incentive, the only thing you as the customer have to do is choose to work with an Energy Trust of Oregon Trade Ally contractor. I'll be talking more about that program at the end of the presentation. Next up, there's also Energy Trust of Oregon's income qualified program that is called Solar Within Reach. This is the same type of system, however, is just some slightly higher incentives in order to help offset for low income subscribers and low and middle income subscribers. So this is $1.10 per watt up to $6,600 for installed solar for PGE customers, and $900 per kilowatt hour up to 11,700 for installed storage. And then for Pacific Power, it's 90 cents per watt up to $5,400 and $750 per kilowatt hour up to 9,000 for Pacific Power customers. This program does have a very generous cutoff, with the household of four income threshold being $128,564. So be sure to check out this program if you think you might be able to utilize it. So in just a moment, I'm going to be going through some example budgets of how much solar and storage systems can cost, but these are just examples, and there are many reasons the cost of your solar system may be different. Some of those reasons include the size of the system, whether or not you need to re-roof, if you need to do any structural analysis or upgrades, and what incentives you're able to access. And then similarly, the costs also can vary wildly with storage. And then some reasons that cost can change is whether or not you're installing storage at the same time as solar or later, how many batteries you are adding if you're creating an essential loads panel, how far you're installing your batteries from your electric panel, and how many incentives you're able to access. So here's a sample budget for an 8 kilowatt solar system. The cost before incentives for an 8 kilowatt system is $32,000. You then get the Energy Trust of Oregon incentive, which decreases based on your utility company, making the out-of-pocket cost to you, the customer, between just under $31,000 essentially on average. From there, you can then get to claim the 30% federal tax credit, bringing the final cost to you, the customer, before energy savings, $21,630 for Pacific Power customers, and $21,735 for PGE customers. Next up, here's a sample budget for an 8 kilowatt solar system with 13.5 kilowatt hours of storage added. The cost before incentives for this would be $52,000, and the Energy Trust incentive then decreases that further, making the out-of-pocket cost about $45,000. From there, you then get to claim that 30% federal tax credit, which does cover both solar and storage, and it makes the final and then that makes the final cost to you about $31,000, and then again lower than that if you are income qualified and able to access those higher incentives. Last up, we have an example budget of if you're adding solar, if you already have an 8 kilowatt solar system and you are then adding that 13.5 kilowatt hours of storage after the fact. So it would be the cost of solar is before incentives would be $32,000, and the cost of the battery added after would be $23,000. You can then still claim both of those Energy Trust of Oregon incentives, even though you're installing them at a separate time, and it makes the out-of-pocket cost to you, the customer, about $48,000, and you then get to claim that 30% federal tax credit, making the final cost to you, the customer, before energy savings, just under $34,000. So those are some really big numbers. However, financing is very common. Some solar contractors will have a financer they work with commonly, and they might have loans tailored to solar. However, we also recommend asking your bank or local credit union to see what options they also have for you. So now with all this information, how can you get started on your solar journey? So as I said, I would highly recommend working with an Energy Trust of Oregon trade ally. These are rigorously qualified solar installers who have been vetted by Energy Trust of Oregon and therefore are approved to offer Energy Trust of Oregon incentives. In order to access either of those Energy Trust of Oregon incentives I've talked about, either the standard one or Solar Within Reach, which is the income qualified program, you do have to work with a trade ally of Energy Trust. They are familiar with all Energy Trust design and installation requirements and will be best suited in order to make sure you can access everything. I'm going to put that information I put in the chat earlier in the chat once again, and included in there is a link to the Energy Trust of Oregon Solar Bid Tool. Energy Trust of Oregon Solar Bid Tool allows you to put in your information online and then receive bids from up to 3 contractors who work in your area. All of the contractors who come through this tool are Energy Trust of Oregon trade allies, and the tool is very easy to use. Once you have selected a contractor and signed the paperwork. Your contractor will help complete all the paperwork for you, except for the tax credit. You're ultimately responsible for making sure you claim that correctly. The permitting process can take from 2 to 12 months, depending on where you are in the state. However, once you have all your permits, installation is very quick at usually only 1 to 4 days. And your contractor will then manage all inspections and interconnections. You just get to enjoy your new electricity coming from the sun. So now that is all the information I have for you. As a reminder, please put any questions you have in the chat. And while people are doing that, I'm also going to check and see. I think we already have one question in there. But please put in more. One question is, if you have batteries for storage, will it work if the power is lost? So yes. So if you have batteries, that allows you to use power when the grid is down, because your home will essentially become a closed circuit, or another way to visualize it is an island. So you would be the only bit of light on the island that has power. And also, I'm going to launch one last poll just to see how I did talking, but please put questions in the chat. I'm here to get them answered for you. The next question that someone has asked is, how much power do the panels produce in general? So this, annoyingly, I'm going to say it depends. In order to access incentive, the very technical answer is that in order to access the majority of incentives, you need to have a certain threshold of solar resource, which is why things like SHAKE can prohibit your ability to go solar, because otherwise you just are not generating enough, you're not getting enough sun in order to make your panels worthwhile. I believe that number today is around 80 or 85%. However, I can be wrong, and your solar contractor is the one who can measure whether or not you have enough solar resource. Panels are getting more and more effective with each year, and the ones produced today are much more efficient than ones in the past. But the general amount of kilowatts really depends on the weather that day and how much solar resource your specific home gets. Hopefully the crows outside my window are not too distracting from everyone. But thank you everyone for being here today. I really appreciate it. I'm happy to stay on for as long as you need. If there are any other questions. Oh, two more questions just came in the chat. Is there a specific type of roof construction that works better for solar installation? Solar can be installed on all different roof types. If you are re-roofing your home, a standing seam metal roof is typically very easy to install on, and a lot of people who are getting a new roof with plans to get solar after um will opt for that standing seam metal roof. However, from my understanding, they are also very highly rated in terms of longevity. Though I have never had to re-roof a home, so I am unsure specifically on that. But there are all types of roof, any type of roof will work with solar. It really is just about having as large of a continuous plane to put the solar on as possible. The next question is, do you consider cases where multiple units can be connected in a microgrid and share energy storage rather than having each unit have its own storage solar? Do you have cases where neighbors share energy? So this is a complicated question, as finding apartment buildings with solar is still few and far between. There have been some really great projects recently of apartment buildings with solar. However, there are not that many of them. And in HOAs and condo communities, while an HOA cannot prohibit you from getting solar, if you're in a condo where you have what is technically a shared roof, technically neither occupant would own that roof. There are cases, Habitat for Humanity, I know does some great work where multiple units can be connected in a microgrid, but usually they still have their own breaker panel, which means there are specific panels tied to each system, if that makes sense. That's a question that I can definitely get you some more details of if you would like to email us at info@Solar Oregon. I can try and answer that question a little bit better, but I would say it really just depends on the situation. I'm not saying it hasn't been done, but because it is tied to the electrical panel, usually panels would go specifically to a specific one or to a specific unit. And another question that came in is, what is the payback time for the example you presented with solar and storage? So payback time, again, will also vary because it depends on how much electricity you are using on average. If your system sets off your entire expected electricity usage and you have a very high electric bill, your payback time is obviously going to be a little bit shorter than if you are pretty minimal, have a very efficient home, and don't need to use that much electricity in general. We usually quote payback time as being between 10 and 20 years, but that is something your solar contractor will calculate for you as well as part of the quoting process. As I said, I am more than happy to stay on and help answer all questions. If there are any questions you would like to email us, you can contact me at info@solaroregon.org. But thank you all for being here tonight. I hope you have a great rest of your evening.